Hello everyone, Zendro Gaming coming at y'all with another video, and in today's video we're going to be going over the Los Angeles regionals that happened this past weekend. I am using a combination of Eggman Events site that they have information on that, and then we also are going to reference the pie chart from exburst.dev, and then also my personal pie chart from the local kind of meta scene before these big tournaments kind of took place, and then come together to find some common line of them, kind of find out where the meta is sitting, if you think that Kenshin is broken or not, or if I do, and just kind of talk to you guys a little bit about what happened this weekend, what I think the impact on the game will be, and where I think the game will be going from here. But just to kind of touch up on it in reverse, right? So before the big regionals a couple weeks ago, it was Roy, Suzaku, Blue JJK, and Purple Bleach, kind of all just taking up a pretty decent amount of the pie chart together, right? And then we had a big tournament going on, the regionals at Dallas took place, and there was a nice mix of the pie chart of a bunch of Roys, a bunch of Purple Bleach, a bunch of Toto, a bunch of Suzaku, and a bunch of the Blue JJK. With that being said, there was a couple of different green and yellow One Punch Man decks in the top 32 there. And then, moving forward, going to the one that just happened this past weekend, this is post Rurouni Kenshin and Hunter x Hunter Volume 2 release, right? So, to no surprise, it is over 50% of Kenshin in the top for just red Kenshin, and then it looks like this is technically like probably the Eggman events doesn't show like the percentages wise, but this looks like over 75%, right? Because if it was a straight line across, that'd be 75%, but looking like over 50% for Red Kenshin, and then looking like kind of 35, 33-ish% of the purple Saito Kenshin deck, which I do love a lot from this set as well. So you can see him in the top 32 archetype breakdown, 17 different Rurouni Kenshins, the red Rurouni Kenshin, and 9 of the purple Kenshin Saito combo deck here, which is a lot, right? Like, if you do those numbers, that's what, 26 of the top 32 are just 2 different Kenshin decks. And what I want to say about this here, I guess let's break the pie chart down even more. The normal containers that we saw beforehand, 2 green Lancelot, 2 blue JJK, 1 Full Metal Alchemist Roy Mustang, and then 1 purple Bleach sneaking into there as well, right? But Union Arena, I say it in so many different videos, has a recency bias, right? Whatever the newest sets are, they will get played a ton. And I wasn't able to find the data beforehand, before these tournaments. I must have deleted it or something, but on this pie chart beforehand, it was a pretty humongous chunk of Roy Mustang the first weekend that it came out, and it was also taking up, while it wasn't taking up 50% of the meta, it was a good like 35 to 40%, with that being, one deck, and then the Kenshin being one deck taking up 50 something. So we've definitely not seen a deck take up this much of a pie chart since Blue JJK came out, and then also Purple Code, but even then I don't think it was quite this dominating as we did see those decks, right? And to talk about a little bit, the Kenshin decks I think are the first decks, or the first sets in general, that have a very clear power up in the scaling of the decks overall. So there's more triggers in all the decks. The decks are all statted out with more BP on normal effects that we see on other characters in other different IPs. So some of the same like double energy generators will be 3000 BP instead of 25, things like that. And then also all these decks have access to the two energy drop cards that all say if you don't have any energy, you can play them for free, right? So that acts as another 0 drop, and all these decks have access to those things with more triggers, and they all have 4 or 8 different raid targets, which also helps with the decks, right? So they're just very, very consistent, really good decks. They are really, really good, but I don't think that this is going to be what we see going in the future. I think that this was, 1 week before the set came out, or 1 week after the set came out, technically, I guess. And it's just like you don't know your matchups, right? Like if people play new decks and those new decks are really, really strong, well, you haven't gotten any time to practice your decks against those decks, so you don't know what the key cards are to take out in those matchups. So with the amount of people playing it, the deck being newer, I think that that has a lot to do with why it's like over 75% both these two decks. But at the same time, I do think that these decks are manageable. I don't think that this is like a tier 0 format where Kenshin will only be the best deck and it only gets 50%. I think that all these other strong decks have a way to win. And as you can see here, they clearly do because a couple of them still stuck in to the top with the amount of people on these two decks. And I think that we'll see that both these decks are, definitely beatable. And I don't think it's going to be the end of the world. I just wanted to touch on that because I've seen a lot of people bringing that up. And what I do want to go over though is like kind of the order here. So Kenshin Red got first place. Roy Mustang got second place. So Roy is still a very, 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 very powerful deck. I unfortunately was working the shop, so I did not get to pay a ton of attention to any of the Roy Mustang matches. But I don't think there was any Roy Mustangs ever on the main screens. I think it was almost always red and purple Kenshin matchups or red Kenshin matchups, and then I think there was one other matchup that was different, but I don't remember seeing the Roy Mustang be on the feature matchups. But Roy Mustang getting second place, which is what a lot of people would assume was the best deck before Kenshin coming out too. Saito bringing in third place. We saw a lot of Saitos. Then fourth and fifth by Kenshin players, red Kenshin players. Sixth place with the purple bleach deck, Renji Rush in quotations, if you want to say. Uh, Another Saito in 7th, Red Kenshin 8th, Saito 9th, Kenshin 10th, Saito 11th and 12th, Kenshin 13th, Saito 14th, and then all the way down in 15th place is where we get our first Lancelot deck. And the reason I think Lancelot's did not do so well is because Kenshin is a very aggressive, consistent, low to the ground deck, and if you're just not able to get the 8 drop down soon enough, you do just lose to the pressure, and they can control your energy line by making you move your units back. With that being said, Saito also does mess with green build 'em up decks energy lines because he can, snipe the stuff that you need, or put you in a bad spot as well with the impact. And I think he's just a little bit lower to the ground for all the pressure that this raid card gets. Is very, very insane getting the snipe and impact really strong. So I think just a couple of different instances. Mainly, Kenshin really beats up on Lancelot. 17th place, another Saito. 18th, 19th, 20, all red Kenshins. 21st, Saito. And then our second green Lancelot deck in 22nd, 23rd, a Kenshin, and then our first Sukuna deck all the way down in 24th. Now, this is a little surprising seeing this so down far on the match board here. I'm not sure of the matchup spreads on Sukuna. I would just imagine, though, that a lot of people that were probably playing Sukuna or were going to play Sukuna just decided to play the red Kenshin deck. Instead, since it's like the newest kid on the block, stronger deck in the format, one of the strongest decks, and I think a lot of that just happens, and it is a little bit build 'em up as well too, but I do not think that Sukuna is going anywhere. 25th, 26th, Red Kenshin, 27th, another Sukuna, so you can see that it did perform well enough to get a multiple tops. 28th, Saito. 29th, 30th, 31st, 32nd, all Kenshin. So it just shows how consistent this Kenshin deck is. And I do want to say that a lot of these are probably just, good tiebreakers as well, not leaving room for a lot of other decks that probably just didn't start off as well as these Kenshin players did in these matchups. But still a big shout out to all the players on this list. You can see all their names here. I'm not going to go through everyone's names on here. But big shout out to everyone that did top. Nothing to take away from anyone who did it. Definitely to Snake for sneaking the 6th with that. And Nami Lover for, enjoying the Roy Mustang enough to keep playing it and get second place is a big deal, right? So we see the pie chart here. We see the data on here from the last pie chart. The big missing out are no One Punch Man decks, right? Because they do take time to get going and just lacking the consistency. And like I said, players just not being on that. No Toto in the top 32 from this regional, which is honestly very surprising. But to be honest, Kenshin messes up people's energy line faster and more consistent than Toto does, right? And while also giving a lot of clear on the board. So I think a lot of people who are probably trying to play Toto just ended up playing Kenshin because Kenshin can do what Toto does, lower to the ground. Now, Kitchen doesn't have any way to get a 6k body with damage 2 on the board, but it does have the double attacker, which is really, really strong, and just controls the board by making your opponent have to mess up their energy line, which is really, really strong. So missing out on these decks from the last big tournament, one thing to note. But I do think that there is a lot of counterplay the Toto deck and some of these green build 'em up decks can do to try to get back into the game. And to touch on the pie chart beforehand to see what else was missing, some noticeable missing decks, Full Metal Alchemist, purple, a yellow not showing up, no code, no purple Gawain on this list, right? And with that being said, I was going through and editing my these little pros and con thing, the thumbs up, down thing, and I wanted to edit this with you guys, like along with y'all. I was halfway starting to do it, and then I was like, maybe this would be a little bit better to do with people, right? So you can see kind of like what I'm thinking. So I didn't take out the shining thing here. So if you remember the way this looked last time, it was the green golden board, right? Because Suzaku really, really showed out in the last big tournament. And with that being said, is Kenshin decks are strong, which we knew they were going to be, right? Like everyone knew these decks were strong. I think probably the surprise one is Saito. I didn't think that Saito would show up like it did. I was very, very wrong about Saito. I thought it was like a strong top 32-ish deck. We'd probably see a couple of different of these decks in there, maybe one or two. I did not think it would be as prevalent as it was here, and I think that's just not me realizing just how low the ceiling is for all the Kenshin decks. Every single Kenshin deck has a lower ceiling than every other deck in the game, based off of the new cards that these decks have at their disposal and the amount of triggers they get to run in them. All of the Kenshin decks are very, very consistent, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the other couple of decks, show up. I do think Sanosuke is pretty strong as well as the Aoshi deck, getting in multiple attackers. But yes, the Kenshin decks are strong. Big 3 thumbs up for these decks, right? And then the only thing I changed on the things here is, right, is I moved Suzaku down to the double up tier. And the last message was, disruption is in a meta, needing energy is still good. I do think that this statement still stays pretty strong. We did still see, the Suzaku getting their tops, the purple bleaches getting their tops, and the Roys getting their tops. We just didn't see Toto doing it. And like I said, if I had to say, not seeing Toto is probably my biggest disappointment, because I love this deck and it is so good. So 2 thumbs down for people not believing in Toto and not taking it to this tournament to let it get some tops, because he is my best friendo. I love Toto so much, and to not see anyone get a top with him makes me really, really sad. So 2 thumbs down on and no one playing Toto and getting the top. Not that I think the deck is not good, right? I still think that the deck deserves to be over here in the tier with these other 4 decks of that like kind of second-ish tier of decks that still are very, very strong meta contenders, and the deck still just does a lot. But disruption in the meta, needing energy is so good, right? And that was mainly because, Ichigo, Roy, and Toto kind of could mess up Suzaku's energy line and do some things, but the Kenshin decks do it also, right? So it kind of puts Suzaku, I think, in a tough spot as well. So I would probably have to move Suzaku down to, 1 thumbs down on Suzaku stocks, I think, are going down for sure, because it just is going to have a rough matchup into a lot of these Kenshin matchups, making you mess up your energy line. While I still do think Purple Bleach, Roy Mustang, and Toto are still going to be eating really, really well, I think we'll see less people playing Suzaku, but I still am upset with people not playing Toto. And then I had a thumbs up for the more decks represented in the top 32 is better than ever, right? That was my last message, so I left in the quotations here, or hyphens, or so we thought, right? So it was very, very diverse, and take for granted, this is still, like, for most card games, this is what a lot of other card games look like, and we've been fortunate enough to not have a situation like this pop up before, but I do still think that the meta is very, very diverse. There are still a lot of really strong decks that I think you can play. These 6 here, or 5 here, being definitely still some of the 5 best, strongest decks in the game, and now these 2 other slots just being taken up by the new Kenshin decks, right? So I think that would be the tier of decks I'd probably put in, like, that top, like, 10-ish level. The, Purple Bleach, Purple Toto, Suzaku, Blue JJK, Blue Roy, and then the Kenshin decks showing up for sure. But I still think that the game is still very diverse, and we will see a more diverse meta going into the next regionals, because people will, be able to get their playtesting in against these different matchups of the Kenshin and the Saito. that it'll make it where the people want to play other decks, they'll have a good time, right? Definitely 3 big thumbs down for, releases before big events. Now, I know that they can't control that too much, and I really don't have a problem too much about this, but the community does. I see it in chats all the time, people being very upset about releases before big events, and if these big events are legal, right? Because a big part of going to a tournament is... competitive play is knowing how to play test into matchups. While I do think that you need to be flexible as well to be ready for new things coming in, I know a lot of people who do kind of run through the kind of competitive scenes in card games do like to have, a stable representation of a meta before going into it, before they spend money going into it and spending all their time. But I think that, us as a community, that does feel bad, but I think at the end of the day, it's not that big of a deal because we need to get all this product out for Union Arena. And while I wanted to make sure I touched up on this because I've seen the community being really upset about it, the community being 3 thumbs down on releases before big events, I think this is just something they can't help. And then at the same time, it does make for big surprises like this, right? I don't think anyone thought it'd be 75%, over 75% of the 2 Kenshin decks, showing up in the meta quite that hard, right? And that makes it surprising for us, and it puts it on the map for other people to be like, all right, I got to make sure I can beat Red Kenshin and Purple Saito Kenshin, which are 2 very, very different decks, right? So that'll be something we'll talk about a little lower on the video. And then one of the last notes from the last time I did the thumbs ups was, Purple and Blue Code have rough matchups, and they can't really make it in the meta at the moment. And now I'm even more upset, so I added another note. No code at all outside of Green Kogia Suzaku, the Green Golden Boy, showing up for Kogias big time, at least getting their top end. So really sad not to see any Kogias or any Hunter x Hunter. 2 of my favorite IPs, and then, Rurouni Kenshin is like one of my tops now too, but since the decks are so strong, I'm not really a huge meta player, so I built both these decks, and I will test them a lot and play them a lot, but probably not at the regionals, because anytime I go to a regional, I like to always play like a rogue or spicy deck to try and make a statement about, you don't always have to play the best thing to do well at tournaments, but I think if my best bet, I would pick Kenshin to probably win the next regional as well, just because it is so consistent, but it doesn't mean I don't think the deck is unbeatable. And on the last time we did this, we said what kind of impact will Kenshin and Hunter x Hunter Volume 2 have on the metagame? Well, we did say that it was going to be a huge impact, right? Saying that Kenshin was definitely the biggest impact, and then Saito coming up, then the Kenshin, Seijiru Hiko, and then the other 3 decks as well. But I think every single one of these decks, if you wanted to play one of them in the next big regional or any big tournament you want to go to, or even just your locals, right, you will have fun. All these decks are fun because they're all very, very fluid, they're very thematic, and they're all very strong, fun decks. And I think that we all should really be happy that hopefully going forward now, every set will have decks that are this fluid and consistent and fun to play, because I do think that this has been the best set they've released so far, with how you can just build any of these decks. They all do their thing. They're all consistent enough to where you almost never have a bad game playing them, right? Where I can't say the same as, like, I did not expect any Hunter x Hunter decks, like, to top, right? I said minor impact, so it was next to none. So, like, 0 impact really is what it ended up being. And I think it will continue being, but it's because these decks are way harder to build, because it's not as easy as, in Kenshin, the Red Kenshin deck, it's just Kenshins and Miss Kaorus. In the Saito deck, it's just Saitos and just Kenshins, right? The decks are really easy to build. There's no creative deck building in those decks. It's just consistent core pieces, whereas, like, the yellow and green Gone and Friend decks do require very creative deck building to even try to get the deck to be playable. And, I'm going to be working on all my Hunter x Hunter decks to try to find one that I can take to regionals to do well with, because y'all know I want to represent. And it's not Kurapika. I did so much playtesting this weekend with Kurapika, and the green Golden Boy, for me, the true one in my eyes, is just so much slower. Like, Saito, if you ever want to just play Kurapika, Saito is just the newer version of Kurapika. I know it probably just feels a little weird doing it from the back line, but it is everything that you want Kurapika to do, Saito does now, with the snipe and impact. Maybe you don't get as many instances of impact, but I wish I was given a 4-drop raid Kurapika that literally just says the same thing as the 4-drop raid Saito, and Kurapika will be so much more consistent. I think probably not even as good as Saito, but I am a little upset about that, because I think that that's what the deck is missing. But I'm going to try to do some creative deck building to see what I can get done with the Hunter x Hunter decks. But I don't foresee any of these doing very well, but I would not be surprised, because it just takes someone, it could be you, to crack the code, go and take your favorite IP, find some spicy build with it, find a way to work, and I'll be working hard doing that for Hunter x Hunter. Hopefully I can find one I feel comfortable with and spicy enough to take. If not, you know, I'll probably just take one of the Kenshin decks or Todo or Purple Kogia, some of my other favorite IPs. But we do have, you know, some big IPs coming out with the Kaiju number 8 and also the big brother of Hunter x Hunter. The Spirit Gun coming into play will be really fun to, you know, mess around with a lot of those decks to see just exactly what they could do in the meta. And if I'm probably taking a best bet, I'll probably end up having to take one of those decks, so that way I can probably do well with one of my favorite IPs, because Kenshin is a little bit lower than me on the IP scaling, or IP in my heart, as Yu Yu Hakusho and Hunter x Hunter are. Those are definitely two of my favorites because they're made by the same mangaka as well, right? But let me know in the comments down below what y'all think. Do you think that the Kenshin decks do make it a tier 0 meta or not? I don't think so. I think the meta will be just absolutely fine. We see this often and over again. If you watch any of my videos, this always happens when a deck comes out. Now, not quite to this level because we've not seen decks with this level in the game yet, right? But I do think that the game will be in a healthy state. I still think that you can play whatever deck you want and try to make it work. I think that you just have a little bit harder time now, and in this current state of the meta, it is a little bit harder to make some of these old decks work since all these new ones have so many tools. But I appreciate y'all hanging out with me today. Please leave the video a like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We are getting closer and closer to 500 subs on here, and I'm super excited about it. But thank y'all very much. Peace.